considered. But you're saying that the idea, the motif is not that you shouldn't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's that you shouldn't do it without permission.
Peterson is more on the side of he's more interested on clinical psychology. So he's interested in what works for helping a patient, so to speak. Vervaeke is more interested in um, diagnosing what is the problem of our time, and then trying to come up with a philosophical framework to solve it. How's everything been, man?
Pretty good, man. I just finished watching your um dragon game. What's it called exactly?
Dragon Slayers.
Dragon Slayers with Caden and Tom, and I enjoyed that. I might actually watch it again because like it was just really interesting, and there was a lot of things they were saying that I wanted to remember. Um it's
Yeah, no,
such a fun format.
yeah, I thought it was very, very fun this time. I think both were so far both episodes have been great, but it's becoming a little bit more it's coming a little bit more natural now,
Hmm.
slowly but surely. And I made a little bit of adjustments to the game. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, man. I think it turned out pretty good. Hopefully you'll keep on getting better and better. We'll see if we can get some more people interested, um, to give it a try.
I like how the dragon at the end is always like, I'm gonna next time
I'm
I'm gonna
gonna
get
get
you just
yeah.
eternally every single time.
Yeah, I figured like that was probably like the best way to finish it up. So it kind of feels like everybody feels like also confident about like how they did, because I think it's still like everybody does very good anyways. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a matter of opinion too. Uh, like depending on how where you land on the argument and stuff like that. So I always feel like it's good to just kind of like leave the dragon kind of like defeated, or at least the dragon feeling like, oh yeah, I could have done better to get you. You did a very good job. Almost knocked me
Y-
out basically. But yeah.
Yeah. Um, you're saying you're hoping more people sort of, want to sign up. Do you have any people for the next one?
I have one. He's a friend that we also met through Peterson Academy, and he's interested in trying it for a while. But I don't have somebody else yet.
Hmm.
But I haven't advertised it that much.
Right.
But I'm already planning to make a little bit more posts about it. And see if maybe I can uh, get some more interest going. The next three are gonna be on intro to psychology, personality and its transformations, and intelligence, rationality, wisdom, and spirituality. I'm preparing for
Right.
those right now. I got the intro to psychology already good to go, but the other ones I'm kind of like still writing the answers and the questions and stuff like that. So
I mean, you might have a difficult time if each one of those are supposed to be a unique spot because I'm not sure, you know, how many people will actually.
yeah, like the good thing about it is like I'm also kind of going at it with not too much it's not so rigid, I guess. Like it's kind of I'm trying to be very flexible, so like if there's not too many people interested in it, maybe what I'll do is maybe I'll like modify it again a little bit and be like, okay, every season is going to be like, I don't know, if I can get 6 to 10 participants, and then we'll focus on
Hmm.
these 10 participants, and then kind of like maybe make it a few get people to come back a few more times to rack up their points, and then see how it goes like that. Then maybe like next season, maybe we'll try it the same way, or maybe we'll see if there's more interest. We can kind of like adjust it as it goes. But yeah.
I don't know. This is this. I don't know why, but like watching both. Tom, Scott, and you like kind of interact and play around, and I wasn't a part of it, was amazing. Like for some reason, because I've like talked to all of you before, and just being able to just sit and observe the whole thing go down and not having to stress out about not that I really stress out, but it's something about just being able to watch it was incredibly nice.
Yeah. No, that's that. Thank you so much, man. I'm really glad that that you're enjoying it. I hope that it can connect with more people for sure. I think the main reason why I'm making it is so um I don't know, because I'm sure that you have by now like kind of like um picked up that a lot of the questions around the game are regarding God. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
They're
yeah.
like taking a lot of philosophical ideas and things like that, and then I'm applying it to try to test. Okay, it doesn't matter. You can be agnostic or atheist or a believer, but I want to push regardless to the ideas that the people present. So like I get give a statement regarding that, and I want people to really like kind of like grapple with that,
Hmm.
like um I guess be confronted a little bit more with this type of questions, so push them to think about it a little bit deeper. Um, um so yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I think it turned out pretty good, but I definitely have a lot of room for improvement as well. That's for sure.
The questions are, I find, remarkably good in that they divide the line in a very good place where you can kind of go either way and have a solid argument.
Yeah, there. Um, yeah, I think I don't know. Like I just sort of like think through them, like think through the course, because I think okay. I think this whole thing was born out of mostly watching I think a lot of Vervaeke's work, but also um because there's a promise in the Bible that says that like John first starts with like Jesus is the logos of creation, right? And so like what that kind of like implies is that in if you if it were to be the truth, what that means is that basically no matter what it is that you're studying, no matter what it is that you're paying attention to, you should be able to draw a thread of truth through all of them and connect it to the logos, because like that's the promise that it makes, right? That he's what actually gathers everything into coherence and gives it purpose and meaning. And so like if that's the case, so I try to test all of these ideas like that. So like I try to see like, okay, well there's all of this very interesting material in here. How can I try to sort of like connect it to that? And then, like obviously when I do connect it, then you can either agree or disagree with that. And then, it's just how well can you defend it, And then I try to be also unbiased. Like if there's somebody that, because I clearly I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic. So like if there's somebody that is going to be for on a statement that is pro Christianity, I also try not to be too biased on it. I want to also be able to like present good counter arguments and push hard to people. So yeah, I don't know. Um hopefully I'll get better and better over over more and more as I get more practice, I guess. But yeah.
What did you think about me taking the position that Nietzsche was like a um, a modern day prophet? Like, what do you think about Nietzsche?
So I think that the statement was like he's a modern day prophet but flipped upside down,
Yeah, yeah.
you know? So like I actually think that that is true to a certain extent, because like he was able to describe reality very very closely. Like he was able to like also offer a criticism that was very needed as well, like at the time. So you could say like and it could be like also in a sense like another doctor of the church, but completely upside down. You know what I mean? Because it's not like his pushback didn't cause a whole bunch of other very serious repercussions, like very serious implications after he laid out his philosophy. Because I do think that a lot of his philosophy actually ends up in Marxism, ends up in like communism, and all of this other multiplicity of like um, moralistic views. Like for example, say we in the 21st century we tend to think of morality as being like somebody that is I guess complacent with what the majority of the masses want you to be complacent with. They're not really thinking about um, well, what is the responsibility of a good human being. They're more thinking about like what is the how can I get people to just leave me alone and let me live however I want, so that I can also do and I will also offer to do the same thing to others. You know what I mean? Um, but I think that that's not, like you cannot have both, because at some point there comes a point where you have to actually just speak the truth to people. You know what I mean? You cannot have it both ways. You cannot be just like complacent all the time and be like, I don't want to hurt your feelings, and because of that, whatever goes, you know. But also, yeah, sorry.
Uh, you could tell that I had something to say. Um,
Yeah, I sometimes I talk too much. You need to stop me, because otherwise I like my brain will just go like way too many places.
oh no, you're good. Um, it's I don't know. It's just like a default thing I have to. I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. But I was wondering. Wait, so like, where do you think morality grounds out? And do you? Because it's the Peterson model is that um if you sort of are truthful in a very deep sense, that road leads to God. And that there's to maybe really caricature this idea, there's maybe two paths to God, because if you're very truthful and in that way, you will end up with God, and if you um go the religious way, you also end up at God. What do you think about that?
I think that it is possible. Like, what you mean is like, if you try to be if committed to being truthful, and you still remain, say, secular, if you can still through that journey find God. Is that
Yeah,
what you're trying to say?
right.
Yeah, I think that that is true. But it doesn't mean that it always happens. I think that at one point you can we can rationalize anything. You know what I mean? Like, this is one of the problems, I think, also, well, like, also understanding that reality is not just objective, because we also had this debate in Scott's and we were touching on the whether if truth is actually objective or subjective, and I was trying to argue that it's actually in between. It's a little bit of both, and I think that it's the phenomenologists actually present a very good argument for this being the case. Like, they say basically, like, what is most real is what is being experienced, but that what that means is like they're not trying to say, oh, it's just like your subjective experience, that's what's more real. That is the case, but they're also trying to circumvent that dichotomy between like subject and the subjective and the objective. They're trying to say like there's this shared experience that we're all living. You know what I mean? And that is what's actually the most real thing. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean that if I have my own individual experience, that is also less real. perhaps like to a certain degree that's what's most real, and then it makes you wondering, it makes you think, like, for example, like what happens in the mind of a person with schizophrenia or something like that. Is this person actually seeing reality as well? And we're kind of like led to think like, oh no, they're just producing figments of their imagination. But what if like they're actually perceiving reality in its wholeness, in its like what I was arguing, that reality is actually its moreness and its suchness, the plenitude of everything, where you can find like all of this inexhaustibility in it, right? And so which is actually the case, like I don't know if you're familiar with Aldous Huxley. He wrote an essay called The Doors of Perception. He takes a very, very high dose of mescaline in it, and he describes like what's it like to be in that state. And basically, what he gets at is that there's no real difference between like an schizophrenic person and somebody that is like in a very high psychedelic trip. You know what I mean? And so,
Hmm.
um, so it gets us to think like, okay, well, if it's the case that it's in between both the subject and the objective, like that reality is like that, then um first of all, like there is a reality that we are shared, but second of all, it's also the case that somebody can have a corrupted view of reality and somebody can have a true view of reality. Hence, when we talk about like the allegory of the cave from Plato, right? That some people that can be trapped in a cave, just like scared and only watching the the shadows, right? And there's some other person that breaks the shackles and starts walking out the cave, up the hole into the world, and it's an uncomfortable experience and trip, but eventually he gets to see all the beauty that is out there. So if that's the case, if you can have these two, depending on where you focus your attention on, if you can have these two different sort of conceptualizations of what reality is, um, then we can rationalize anything. We can just be like, you can tell me something, and like, even if it's a lie, do, I can juggle my brain to help me believe that thing if I'm committed to it forever. You know what I mean? So at a certain point, and there's things such as, for example, God. Like when the question is about God, well, God is not something that we can, like maybe we can test like, oh, how beneficial is it for people, or how is it how it has I don't know, helped certain people overcome addictions and united communities and things like that. We can measure those things empirically, but we cannot actually measure God, like run a scientific experiment and be like, oh yeah, this is a definite proof that God exists, because it's like Jordan Peterson said, it's like, well, it depends on what your definition of real is. Like, is God real? Well, you could say it's hyper real. It's more than real. It's like it's outside. It's completely outside of our capabilities of us studying him, because it's something that it's so transcendent that it's like impossible to actually be like, okay, just put it on a test tube and tell me what answer we're gonna get. And so at some point you cannot just use your intelligence. You need to have faith, you know? That's why, like, I think the insistence in the Bible about, like, um, on faith, that we get saved through faith and not through any other means, it's so beautiful and powerful and important, because it reminds us of our dependence on the transcendent. It reminds us that it's not by our means really that we are able to um, overcome anything. If we do overcome anything, it's because of grace, actually. And I know that sounds kind of like it sounds weird to say that, or it sounds like not what you want to hear in a postmodern society, like after having embraced the will to power so much from Nietzsche's philosophy, that a lot of, like basically a lot of postmodern philosophy starts picking up and commits to it. You know what I mean? And so I think that because of that, jumping again back at the initial question about like Nietzsche and being like a flipped prophet, um, I think that he was able to describe a lot of things that perhaps we were not ready to ask about God, and it was able to disclose so many things that we were needed, but the same token, it caused a lot of problems as well, and not problems that are problems that unleashed a big amount of evil in the world, like it's not like the implications of his philosophy, we're still living them now, and it's like people that don't get like the extent to which his philosophy like actually affects all of us, like even the most committed religious person, it's like at least mildly is affected by it, unconsciously. And
Wait, how does that how does that reconcile with the idea of the logos though? Because on one hand, you're describing this sort of continuity through o- the entirety of ontology, that there is some kind of logos that you can um that has this eternal um continuity, and then on the other hand, you're saying that one cannot sort of find God through rational means at all. And then,
um Yeah, I wouldn't say. Oh, sorry. Just a little like parenthesis. I wouldn't say that it's not that you cannot find it through rational means. Like you can definitely like find it using rationality. I think rationality and logic, like they're very intertwined. Like logos, it's like it has to do with rationality and wisdom and intelligence, and it's very important. It's an important aspect of how we get to experience reality and get to improve
right,
ourselves as well.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. But I mean, but it seems though like what the model that you're constructing, like on one hand, you're saying like, yeah, rationality can lead us somewhere, and it's good, but ultimately, it's a faith thing. So you can find things rationally, but it's a bit circumstantial, which doesn't feel like the pre-Socratic, Socratic definition of the logos, which is this eternal Platonic form almost.
yeah, the reason, okay, it's a little bit it gets a little bit complex here, I think, like when we talk about these things because of semantics as well. Because I think it depends on how we understand faith as well. So like when I say faith is not, I never mean just blindly believing something, and just being like, okay, I
Oh,
accept that.
okay.
When I mean faith or belief, I don't know if maybe like I'm equivocating between those two. But but because I think
It's
that there's
just like the logos, it's a term which is defined differently by everybody.
yeah, and the thing is like, so okay, so like the thing with belief and faith, the way that I understand it is it has nothing to do with what I tell people to just take for granted, or like or take as a given, better. It has more to do with like what me as an agent decide to commit to with an action. That's what shows my faith in something, in a belief, so like say, um for example, I can say that I'm a Christian, but then if I go and start lying every time that I get a chance, if I go and eh, you know do a whole bunch of evil things, that are very, explicitly said in the faith, like through the Ten Commandments, or through more natural and moral law. And I start doing all of those things, and then I just say, "Oh, just my faith in Christ redeems me, and I am able to do all of these things." You know what I mean? Then I'm not really a Christian, because like it's more like what you believe in is like what you act. Your actions actually show what you believe. There's, I don't know. I think you left when we were talking. We were having that little exchange with Scott and you, when I shared with him that there was one phrase that really stuck with me when I encountered Jordan Peterson, when I read 12 Rules for Life. This was like 2017 or something like that. And I just encountered him out of nothing, like I wasn't even involved in any of these things. I was just in an airport traveling back home, and I was just looking for something to read to pass the time, and I just saw 12 Rules for Life there in the shelf, so I bought it and I started reading it. And there's a phrase that is still stuck with me, has stuck with me since then, and it says, "Nobody is an atheist in their actions, and it's their actions who actually determine what they believe in." And it's so powerful and true, because it's like, well, that is one of that is, if not the fundamental problem of like what has gotten us here since probably like the Middle Ages, and all of the mess that happened with like Christianity, say like rising, and then it started to like deconstructing all of this multiplicity of things, because like obviously it's just started giving like people a reason to be skeptical about the intentions of the faith. You know what I mean? When people start like using the faith for like their own personal gain, or using the faith for um any other motive that is not oriented um towards God, like on like towards the trying to understand the will of God. um it always, that's always where it lands. And so like so that's, like, so that's one thing. Like, so when I say that belief is like commitment to an action, to a set of like actions, that's more what I mean by it. And so
Okay,
it's not.
now, so this is one thing then that I don't understand with what you're describing, because now I'm seeing the continuity, because you're saying faith by your definition isn't blind faith, which is you know, another completely legitimate theological perspective of what faith is, where you just blindly accept it. Faith is something which is enacted and is part of the maybe evidence structure that you have. But then I wonder, so like if somebody is truthful entirely and um truthful, so therefore they're coming to understand things, why is it then arbitrary that they would confront the logos properly and come to know God? Because if there is a logos and they are acting in some secular sense the most honest way possible, why would they not come to that? Because then I'm wondering, like, what is the salvation in your model? Like, so the classic salvation is you accept God and you're saved, Jesus, and
Yeah.
you're saved. But the Peterson model is more you go towards truth and you're saved. And so I'm wondering how that.
It's, I think it's the same sort of like, it's the same thing, just put in a different way. You know what I mean? Because I think like, okay, you can be, say for example, agnostic, right? And be truthful always in your exchanges. Like you're just trying to figure out what's going on, right? But you just don't buy it entirely, and you're agnostic, and you just like move forward with that, with the open mind of like, okay, I'm going to approach all of these conversations because I'm on a quest to find truth, right? Because presumably nobody has that truth, right? So we're all like uh, moving towards it, right? If that's the case, then you're, to a certain extent, embodying you're internalizing Socrates, or you're internalizing like the search for truth, and you will inevitably land like, if you know, again, that this is a little bit of like, it goes back to like what I was saying with belief. Like, again, like that's part of my belief, but when what I believe in is that no matter what, if you're honest about your quest, inevitably you will land there, because at some point it's really determined on like, if you're having all of these conversations, um, you have one or two options at the end of the day. You can either just get pissed off at the fact that other people think like that, and always regard them as not, I don't know, eh, just like with arrogance, be like, they don't know what they're talking about, and I know what I'm talking about. Or you can be like, well, there's only one way to fully find out. I gotta, act like what Peterson says. Like, he acts as if like God exists in the world, and so like if you act as if God exists in the world, and then your life ends up in infinite flourishing, what does that mean? You know what I mean? On the contrary, if you act as if God exists, and then your life makes the life of everybody else around you more miserable, what does that mean? You know what I mean? But the promise
Mm.
is like, if you live by that, it you're only going to be a blessing to yourself and other people, always, because you are participating in the truth. You know what I mean? And so like, on the other side, if you start participating in things that land outside of the truth, you can have, we're all like a plethora of different drives. Like, I think Nietzsche also like presented that very well in his philosophy. But if there's some of drives of mind that are actually integrated, and they are like pointing towards like God, to that extent, those drives are going to produce fruit, good fruit. To the extent that the drives that I have not internalized properly in me, and are pointing the opposite way, those drives are just going to manifest as bad fruit. They're going to manifest as death and chaos, and like, bad things, not only for myself but for everybody else around me, and probably also not only right now in this moment, like maybe through my lifetime, but possibly many more.
I see a difficulty in this um pragmatic approach because it's only by testing it that you can know if it's true. So you're saying you act out and then see what the fruits are from enacting a certain belief. But if somebody does that in the other direction, so they act out corrupt philosophy, they're very, very dishonest, they corrupt their own cognition, and then they may perceive likewise the truth. So I'm thinking specifically of an example of somebody who is manifesting their reality. Manifesting is this sort of um u- utilized delusion. So you believe something, and then that has an effect of bringing it about. And a concrete example is somebody goes into a room and they believe they're the most confident person. They manifest that. They manifest this kind of confidence because they believe it. Other people think they're confident, and then it makes it a reality. And so somebody maybe gets very, very good at this other opposite path you can go, and they
Yeah.
find the same results. They go, I am always in a state of illusion and delusion, and it works best.
Yes, but it has to do with like, it has to do with a couple of things. Like, one is like, how can your own, without an ecology of practices, how can you ensure that by your own means you're going to be able to cultivate wisdom? And if you are able to cultivate, and if you have not thought how you're going to cultivate wisdom with this ecology of practices, then how are you going to expect to maybe it works out for a little bit, maybe it works out for like a scenario A or a scenario B. But what if like you continue to play different games, and then all of a sudden you're playing game W, and you're still playing with your same set of skills from game A. You know what I mean? And then if you're not cultivating, like, for example, say, okay, maybe you are, um, let's talk about like the manifestation thing, Okay, let's say you're manifesting your life and things are going well for you, and then all of a sudden, a totalitarian state does unleash in your country. And well, what is the wise thing to do there is the question then. Okay, like like a person that is like in this um with this mindset of manifesting something for their own reality, will continue to cultivate a mindset of egocentrism, of like what is good is my well-being only. You know what I mean? That's what I put first at my hierarchy of values, in my hierarchy of values. And so then we're wrong with the question. Okay, what happens when you're confronted with like um you actually doing the right thing for saving hundreds of other people at the expense of your well-being? Then what happens then? Like, because I think that when those is not only until we are confronted with those very, very almost paradoxical and tricky situations that we cannot really um know who we are. Like Heraclitus also had this like very interesting fragment in his philosophy that says like, and I think Heidegger, I think Caden explained in the game that Heidegger used it just before the war, and it just goes to show as well like how the philosophy of people can be used either for good or bad. But it is also, we cannot discard it, because I think it's also true. Heraclitus thought war is the father of people. It's actually, war actually puts out who people really are. you know so if you're like a kind person, strong, courageous, honest, war is actually only going to be a catalyzer for that. But if you're like a dishonest person that, are not afraid of walking over people, are not afraid of committing like atrocities, are like actually very prone to like maybe even like abuse other people, for your own whims, for example, then the war is just only going to catalyze also that transformation as well. And so like it's all easy until we get confronted with like much harder scenarios. And I think that in the world that we live in today, it's almost impossible um, to have the wisdom to navigate it without God, because
But
there's so
then
many things.
somebody's gonna hear that and they'll go like, "Well, I don't think any seriously catastrophic thing is gonna happen to my society." If you're living in many
But just think
countries,
about it. Just think about it. Maybe not just war, but okay. Like, I'm gonna get at a little bit more theological just before like I explain the next thing, because I think this is important, and it pertains to our conversation. In Genesis, there is this insistence that the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil is called like that precisely because it's what we're also talking about. It's technology and ideas. If they are misaligned from the will of God, when they're misaligned from the will of God, when we are consuming something that we're not ready to partake in, it can have repercussions that end up in sin and death, and a fall. So think about it in the sense like, okay, a very scary scenario would be a war, but what happens, say, as we continue to consume, say, for example, or interact very heavily with like large language models? How is that affecting us? Um, what happens, say, as we continue to separate each other, or like be distant from each other, because there's no longer a need for us to meet in person, because we have ways in which we can just eh, make our experience more comfortable but less real, less deep, you know? What happens, say, when, because for example, like, there's you can see it just in the unwillingness of people to have children, like in our generation. You know what I mean? That is something that actually, it's not for everybody, but like to the majority of people, that's one of their largest source of meaning, and it has always been, because it's something that it's a different, it decenters you. It's a way to actually cultivate wisdom in a very profound way, because now it's no longer just you who matters. It's like now somebody else matters more than you. You know what I mean? And so things like small things, like things like this, that they're not small, but we start thinking of them as things that are so trivial and small, but we're not understanding the implications that it has in our well-being in the long run, in the present, like in the short, medium, and long term. You know what I mean? And it's like this with so many things. Like we can stay here. I don't know if you ever come across the book, Hunter Gatherer's How Guide to the 21st Century by
I
Brett
heard of it,
Weinstein.
never read it.
You should give it a try. It's very, very profound, because they actually point out from a secular scientific perspective, from an evolutionary sense, why um, a very rapid advancement in technology is not actually that great for humans, because we have no way of telling how that's going to impact us, you know, uh, in any of those, like, um, time spans. It's like, I think it's Chesterton who said, like, in politics, if you don't know what something is for, I won't let you change it. I won't let you get rid of it. Tell me what the thing is for first, then you may remove it. So like when we say, like, okay, let's cast away religion, we don't need that. Okay, but why is it? What is it for? It presumably had an evolutionary genesis. Like it evolved for a reason. We need it. It's like in so many cultures. You know, it was a psycho technology that is so powerful. Uh, why should we just dispense with it just because? Like, we have no zero idea of what the
Now, wait,
implications
going
that
back
might
to
be.
what you said about the technology, artificial intelligence, and all this stuff, what we don't know what it's going to do may lead to a catastrophic future. That's if you suppose that the entire project of humanity's goal is just to survive. But it seems like if you look at history, what humanity and nature itself is doing is trying to create more beautiful, complex things in the world, and therefore, you know, artificial intelligence is just one more step in that evolution. This is what we see through the entire history of humanity. We just continually create new technology. This is remarkable technology, but it's still just like what if when we were very, very primitive, somebody said about the wheel, like this is going to we don't know what the consequences are. They would have been correct for sure. The wheel resulted in an ability to maybe have wars on a scale that was before not possible, but still the technology's overall a benefit because it increases the overall sophistication of humanity.
Yeah. So I would say to that is why it's also served no good to go to the other side of the spectrum and being like, oh, I'm just like entirely fundamentalist, like, and I'm just going to demonize all of these things that lay outside of my understanding, because I actually think that there's like a huge, huge benefit to all of these things. Like technology is amazing, and like the marketplace of ideas is extremely important. Regardless of all of the difficulties and and problems that it has caused, it has also yielded an immense amount of life and flourishing. You know, so like we have to be give the devil its due and say and acknowledge that all of these things are also very very good. But what I would say to that is that there's this like also a little bit slightly more esoteric but also still there also in the Bible, and which I think it's like it's also true, is that I think if you could read the Bible from the point of view that God also intended us to have the fruit, but what is sinful is to have taken it without permission. What is sinful is to have taken it on our terms, seeking to be God's ourselves, not
Mm,
oriented properly.
very interesting. This is a recapitulation of the Tower of Babel story, I would say, because I've noticed this about the Tower of Babel story. The Tower of Babel story is this attempt to build something to reach the heavens. To me, this is a metaphor for what ultimately Christ did when he came to earth. He brought us this connection to the heavens, but it was not in its time and its place. Interesting. So you're saying that the because I have this conversation where I look at the story of the Garden of Eden and I say like like after they eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God says now they've become like us, knowing these things. There's an increase in intelligence, and I don't see that as entirely bad. Now, generally, this is considered a Gnostic view, or that's one place where it's considered. But you're saying that the idea, the motif is not that you shouldn't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's that you shouldn't do it without permission.
Yeah, I think that there is a yeah, I think that
That's super interesting.
because it's more like what is sinful is because all of God. The reason why I say that you can read it from that lens is that because God created us in his image, but then also entrusted us with um guiding the whole of creation. So he made, in a way, the way that is set up from Genesis is the creator made us like in his image, like a special being that he created with care, with the purpose of us actually guiding the whole of creation towards his worship, which is like the proper alignment of everything where it should be in place. But when we try to usurp the truth for ourselves, basically, or like put ourselves in the place of God, and then say like all of these things is like on my terms that we're going to build it, then that's when bad things happen. That's when the fall happens. And to an extent, to a certain degree, like I think that also you could also argue. It's funny that you brought like the Tower of Babel and then Jesus, and then you try to connect them together, because I was also going to say that um, there's also this insistence in the Gospels that the battle has already been won by Christ in the cross. Like there is still like we're still in history, we're still going through running the whole thing, but the battle has already been won. So like anybody that is going to come to the faith eventually will come to the faith, because it's already everything. The whole plan was for him to actually execute what he executed, so that we could all find him, or so that we could eventually all be responsible with our lives to continue to join all the dots, and eventually uh, bring down the kingdom of heaven into earth. The problem with all of that is that there's so many problems, like at the same time. It's like this metaphysical battle. It's like that's already been won. Like we already the a final outcome, it's already decided. But what happens in between all of that, it's is what is like, it's where all of the excitement is, and it's where also like a whole bunch of different things have to happen, because it's the same story. Like the story of the fall gets repeated every time that happens. That a thinker, or that an engineer, or that an inventor, a creator, an inventor, like produces something new in this world with the idea of wanting to subdue nature to his own will, disregarding what the proper alignment or the proper purpose of that new invention or new idea, where it should fit, you know. And so like it to the extent that has a little speck of truth in it, it works and it sticks around in people because it has to, because it's the only thing that keeps it alive. And then everything else that is dead in a philosophy or in an invention and everything, that's what causes all of the sin, all of the death, and all of the suffering and destruction that we continue to see in the world. And it's not until like another thinker comes around, pulls out again, like extracts out the little bit of light, and then uses it in his philosophy, works something even better, like maybe puts a little bit more light in it. But then, because we're all fallen creatures and we live in a fallen world, there's also a whole bunch of baggage that comes with it, you know? And so um, that's why also we cannot ultimately, all humans are imperfect, and we cannot, there's nothing that we can do to gain heaven on our by ourselves, you know, because it's impossible to see all of the repercussions that every single all of the implications that every single action that we take on the world is going to have, you know what I mean? And so we have grace because of that, because even for example, like even the philosophy of saints sometimes, like I was reading a Awakening from the Meaning Crisis from Vervaeke, and for example, like Saint Augustine and Saint Thomas Aquinas, their philosophy and their theology were they were um, doctors of the church, of course, like they reformed a huge aspect of the church and they like put it back in place. But it also had other repercussions that we had to deal with after. For example, like Aquinas's philosophy brought back again this type of like dualism, not because he intended it like that, but because it was like the implications of what he was trying to push forward, you know, like trying to unite Aristotelianism and Neoplatonism and all of this with like Christianity. Then the implications of it is that we started thinking also again like in this kind of like two worlds mythology kind of like sense, you know. And so like there's a sense in which like we can, like the only person that was able to do everything perfect without a speck, you know, was Christ on the and we get to continue to participate in his story, even to this day. You know, he continued to influence us so much, like, you know, and influence like the way in which we continue to move forward, even to this day. And it has influenced like so many thinkers, like even the thinkers that you would think that like are the most atheist or secular, they had to still like wrestle with the idea of Christ, and then they had to either reject it or accept it. And to the extent that they are, you know, that they made a contribution to humanity is to the extent that they actually had at least even this tiniest fragment of like the logos that, you know, is able to be connected there, you know, otherwise it wouldn't survive, it wouldn't still have survived, or
The
at least that's
logos,
what I think.
the
Sorry.
logos being connected, being the logos is what truth.
The
How does
logos.
like did Nietzsche have that little bit of connection to the logos
So,
and
for
how?
example, say the logos is what, so the logos itself is like the one, is like what gathers everything into coherence and gives it a purpose, right? So, like, say in Nietzsche's philosophy, I would say maybe perhaps is um, suspicion towards people that are seeking to exert their power over others. You know what I mean? Not so much like, you know, like on the other side, like it's not true that we should be suspicious of all authority. You know, authority
So then
is good.
is it sort of is it sort of accidental that he had that logos, or is it something to do with? Is it because
Yeah,
of his like truth?
I don't think it is that he says like, oh,
Well,
okay, like Christ in this sense, like, or but like I mean,
well,
he himself
hmm.
respected
What
Christ a
I'm trying to
lot.
like what I'm trying to like understand though is like so when it comes to the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, like there you somebody maybe eats from it, you're saying that the result is negative, but sometimes it's not. Like sometimes people do things which are just entirely positive. What I'm trying to like delineate is like
But
what's
which case would you say that like I think like there are things that can be entirely possible. But they need to be like what we were talking about
well
the
like
other day. Like
I mean
they
like
need to
this
have
like go back to the
yeah,
invention of the wheel. Like if somebody invented the wheel and they didn't make a chariot that then they went out and tried to kill somebody. Like if they just invented the wheel, it's easy to conceptualize that well that was at least an innocuous invention.
but it wasn't because then it has all of those other implications. You know what I mean?
But
Like
I mean, but if you suppose that it's somehow evil in its core roots, the invention of it,
isn't
then
yeah.
you're supposing that the progress of humanity is somehow corrupt.
Is the I don't think that it's evil per se. What it's evil is when you don't um connect it again to the proper purpose of it. You know what I mean? So like if I invent
Mm, right.
something and I don't give it like I don't give it a if I invent
Oh, I
something
see.
and I don't say like this is meant for exactly this only reason, and if any other use outside of this reason, it's sacrilegious to this invention, you know?
Right, right.
And then if people don't regard it with that respect and then they use it for the opposite purpose of it, then that is what's evil. You know what I mean? So because like we were saying, like out of technology you can both find like great things and horrible things from every invention, every single invention that you can think of.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a fair perspective. I understand that. But now, when it comes to like what should a person do, what would you say a person should do in the modern day and age? Because you're providing some very, very sophisticated models. Would you say that what a person should do to be saved is understand these sophisticated models or do something more simple like tell the truth or be saved?
I think it goes to I think the best way to say it so that to avoid uh people thinking that I am biased towards one religion is the way that Vervaeke has been saying it, is that you need to put yourself in a place where you have a whole ecology of practices that help you cultivate wisdom. Once you do that, once you're doing that, all of these things will start to become apparent to you as you continue to practice all of those things. Um, because it's ultimately wisdom is the right participation in reality. That's ultimately what wisdom is. So like it's to know how to act properly, in X or Y scenario. So if you are cultivating wisdom, regardless on which tradition you are, it will make it easier for you to identify any of these things. Like in the Christian tradition, we have a whole ecology of practices such as reading the Word of God or partaking of rituals that are around the sacraments, which are like rituals are also very powerful because they are it's like I forget the word of it. It's a disruptive strategy, but with a structure. So like disruptive strategies go back to shamanism when they used to use like say mushrooms and psychedelics and things like that. Like what you want to do is like try to make your have an altered state of consciousness. which makes you a little bit more prone to maybe catch insight, you know? But that's dangerous. So you don't want to do that in that type of like extreme type of way constantly. What you want to do is what you want to set up certain type of rituals in a community that work towards that. So what we do, for example, in Christianity is like we partake of the ritual of the Eucharist, for example, and so like that decenters us, that like concentrates us in like the mysteries of like the breaking the body of Christ, um, all of us consuming the body of Christ, that drinking his blood, for example, all of these things, they're disruptive strategies because, like, if you think about it, like, if you were to like have a visit from an alien, and then you say like, oh yeah, in my world we eat the body and blood of this other man, that would sound insane. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a disruptive strategy, but at the same time, it's so profound because the symbolism that is behind all of that, even if you do it unaware of it, and it's a mystery because it's inexhaustible. It's so much in it. Even somebody that has studied it forever, uh, and continues to, if they're doing the mass properly, they will continue to have more and more revelation as they continue to participate in it, and as they
What is your
continue.
thoughts on the on Orthodoxy versus Protestantism, like high church versus low church?
I was talking about this with Caden the other day, and I think I also I think there's also a problem um, with both parties, because in the scriptures, I think the scriptures are. If Caden is amazing, man, like he's really somebody to talk with to, because he has a very very deep understanding of philosophy and theology, and it's very interesting, like what some of the things that I was able to discover with him. But Christianity is not a religion of condemnation. It's the opposite. Christianity is actually a religion of including the marginal. So why? Because Christ didn't come to the world for only the Jewish sect. Christ came to the world for everybody that laid outside of that as well, but also for primarily for the Jewish people. But to the extent that they didn't uh, receive him, he also came for everybody else, for the whole of creation, for the whole human, uh, uh, for the whole of humanity. So we cannot think of ourselves. We cannot think, like both. There's a lot of denominations, plenty of them. There's both on high church and low church that they are uh, very fundamentalist, on the sense that they jump very fast to condemn those who have not completely understood why there's certain things that are important to maintain, and why is it important to um, have reverence of authority. Like, if you read the Bible properly, you should be able to cultivate the wisdom to be able to navigate all of these things, because there's so many stories that come to mind to try to that for me to try to mention here, but I don't want to see. Okay, just quick disclaimer here. The problem with talking with me is that I jump a lot because I'm very high in openness. So
Yeah, I'm
you
good
have
with
to
that.
kind of like you
I'm
have
good
to
with
kind of like
jumping.
yeah, you have to kind of like push me towards kind of like being a little bit more centered, because I'm gonna jump too much. But um, anyways, um, okay, I was saying, like, it's a it's a religion of like including the outside, you know, is it cannot be a religion of only condemnation, because Christ himself continues to say, like, put the other cheek. Like you read Proverbs, and it goes saying, like, for example, the wise person is slow to anger. The wise person is his words are sweet. They're not looking to, like, create more division. They're not looking to create more conflict. The wise person actually, like, um speaks, it's not that the wise person is, like, shy of telling the truth, but it's that he knows how to say it in a way that is better perceived. You know what I mean? Because there's different ways of saying, like, I can have maybe a friend, I don't know, that maybe is struggling with obesity, and I can tell him, like, oh, you fat ass, like, stop, stand up and go out and work, like, in a freaking very aggressive way, and, like, insulting way, and that's not going to create any type of transformation in him. But if I go to him with, like, a loving type of approach, and I tell him, like, hey man, um it's a beautiful day outside. How about you come with me? I want to go to the park and take a walk. I was really hoping, like, there's this pretty cool forest out there, and I was hoping to maybe you can come with me, and maybe we can just have a chat as we walk. And just continue to go back to get him out of the house for a walk, or something like that. There's different ways of, depending on how you say things, that the result that you're gonna get is completely different. Even if you intend the same result, you can go different ways about it. And so, like, immediately condemning your brothers because they have not completely seen the fullness of the truth is not wise, because nobody has seen the fullness of the truth unless they have been martyred. And to the extent that they have been martyred, they cannot share with us, because only they have been extended the invitation to
I
partake
wasn't
in it.
I wasn't familiar with that philosophical, or sorry, that theological understanding that the martyrs had experienced the fullness of the truth because they're
Yes, so the
saints.
yes, exactly. The martyrs, actually, martyr comes from the word means, to be witness. Is to witness, and it's to be witness of the truth. To be martyred. It's what it means. And so
But
it's very
if you
interesting.
have somebody who would be martyred if they're in the right situation, the right situation doesn't come around, then why would they not be like, you have somebody who is like really, really powerful in their faith, and then if they were in the right situation, they would be martyred, but they're not. So what's the difference between them? Like them getting killed then makes them somehow um uh more
It's
true.
it's because they partake in the truth that Christ lived, you know? Because them being so proximal to the truth, the world rejected them and actually hated them for it and killed them.
What about
So,
like
like,
a metaphorical martyrdom? So what if somebody has that experience, they don't die, but they are so committed in their belief that they um get rejected by the world, but not killed by the world, maybe because of the sophistication of society, then would that person as well be a martyr?
I think to a certain extent, but I think that not everybody, God will never put, like, God will never put you in a situation that you cannot bear. If you're living through something, if you're going through something, is because he's part of his plan, that you're going to be able, that you have what it takes to overcome it, but you have free will, so you can decide to do whatever. You know what I mean? There's like there's like a powerful movie. I don't know. I forget the name. Eh, Silence. It's a novel, actually, by a Japanese artist, author, that was also Catholic. And the novel is, it's about, like, in Japan, how Buddhists persecuted Christians, and they killed them. Like, they used to basically also, like, crucify them, like, um um and there's a scene where, like, this group of Christians, like, they this this um priest basically from Portugal, missionaries that go to Japan because there's another priest that had been lost. Like they didn't know what happened with him on a mission over there. So they go over there trying to look for him, and they find out that Christianity is completely banned there, and that the few Christians that are around, they need to be all like secret, like none of them can actually like tell the government or anything, because the government will literally go there, and every so often they do rounds trying to find like all the Christians to kill them, because like it was not kind of like the religion of the society and whatever. Anyways, at one point they catch them, and there's three men that they put in like pole in the ocean, and they just wait for the tide to come over, and as the tide continues to come over, the waves start like going over them, and then they just trying to wait for them to die, to. And there's the scene, so there's three men there, and one of them, you can see that he's the weight like that he was carrying himself when he got caught. He was not afraid at that point. He was like, I'm not going to deny my faith. And what they would do, actually, they would tell them like, it's easy. If you want to leave, a step on the face of Christ. They would make this little. I remember the name of that they called, but anyways, it's like this little like beautiful like sculpture, like ornamentation. I think it's made of brass, and they tell them like, step on his face and renounce your faith. You know and like this is like some of the most horrible thing that you can do to a believer, because it's like saying like, spit on the face on everything that you believe in. And it goes back to what we were saying, like, faith is actually that. It's like, go to that commitment, you know what I mean? Like, that's the highest form of how you can show your faith. And so like, if you're unwilling to say like, no, I refuse, even if it costs me my life, I refuse to say that I'm going to like um, that my life is more important than the truth, the actual truth. Anyways, the in the scene, they all decide not to step on it, so like they tie them to the pole, and they are there, and there's one guy that is carrying himself very well. Literally, a couple of waves come over, and they're like, man, almost dying. The second wave come over, and you can tell like the guy in the center, he's like okay, he decided not to renounce his faith, but he also had doubt in his heart. So he was like getting like beaten by the waves and harder, and he looks to the sides, and like he sees his friends, and then the one that is like super committed to it, he's like calm. You can see the calmness in his face. The other guy's like freaking out, like like he's like, I'm about to die, like I shouldn't have done this, what am I doing, and this and that. Two waves come by, and the guy that was completely composed had already passed away. It was almost as if God allowed him to not have to suffer through that. Whereas the guy that was all like struggling and everything, to be able to partake in the truth entirely, God knew that he just needed a tiny little bit more to let go of that of of the bodily suffering, so that he could join him as well as another martyr in heaven, as another saint, that refused to deny the faith. It's not that that guy like was going to be denied it, you know, but it was that God needs exactly what everybody needs at every single moment of their lives. And so it's like the story of Job. Job like has to go through all of these like difficult things, and he refuses to renounce his faith. And because of that, at the end, God rewards him with like everything. He gives him everything back and double. But this is like, it's what it's trying to say is like, at the end, okay, but you were asking like, okay, what if it's like a metaphorical type of martyrdom? Like, I think you can kind of like partake in the truth, like in different ways, but that is the highest form of truth, like the fullness of it when you partake in that, because that's like when you are like there, right, like super proximal to God. That's why Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "You're ready to come to the kingdom of heaven." It's like to all of those who are ready, God extends that invitation. It doesn't mean that you have to take it. He just says it. You know, you have gone through all the levels, so to speak, through all the to everything that you had to go through to be able to understand the fullness of it. Now, get ready to enjoy an eternal life of light with me. Here you go. If you are ready for it, if you're ready to show your commitment, you know, show me the
Now,
obedience that Christ showed
one
at the
thing I'm
cross.
wondering though is like, you're saying these things and they sound very beautiful, but like, what are they grounded in?
I think it's grounded in like in the Bible. The Bible continuously says like that same thing, starting with Christ, then the first martyr or proto martyr, Stephen. He was the same way. He like as soon as the Holy Spirit comes around in the book of Acts, he start people start arguing about like whether circumcision is right or wrong and stuff, and then he comes around and then he tells to everybody how it is. He tells them like it's not what you say or what you say. Both like sides of like both extremists are wrong, and it's because of this. Like you can see it like what happened with Abraham. You can see what happened with Isaac. You can see what happened with Christ, and because of that, as people start hearing the truth and truth more, to people that are slaves still of the world get angry at hearing the truth. And so like they start to get more angry, and eventually they all pick up stones and they stone him to death. And they martyred him. That's the first martyr after Christ, the first person to join him in martyrdom right after him. Then it continues with Peter as well. I believe Peter was crucified upside down. It continues with like so many more people. There's
Yeah,
this
but I mean, what I meant by justification though was justification of the idea, which I agree with, by the way, but I'm just like of the idea that when people are martyred, that they are sort of given um the grace to go through it. I mean, I agree with that, but it doesn't seem to be very explicit in the Bible. Like, there's like, Paul and them singing in the jail cell. There's this, but I guess it's a theologically grounded idea because you can say, well, God is loving, so why would he not give them the grace, which is a logical deduction.
Yeah, so I think like you mean like why is it that you mean like why is it that we have to be martyred to be able to partake in the truth? Or do I
Well, I'm
understand your
I'm
question
I'm
correctly?
onto something different now, which is you said like when somebody's martyred, they're certainly given the grace to go through that. They're like the person in the water because of their faith, they didn't have to endure the suffering, which is a good idea, which I agree with, but I just don't know that it's necessarily very grounded in the Bible because like you look at various kinds of death, like they're kind of the same. People get stoned in the Bible. People have bad things happen to them. You know, what like so Jezebel was ripped apart by the dogs after she was thrown off the wall or something, and you could say like that. What's the difference between that and um somebody getting stoned? Like it's not explicit in the Bible that I know of that it said that those who go through hard times through with
I
their
think it's
faith are
more.
saved. And then additionally, I would say, well, why do we not know that even people who are nefarious in their activities are themselves not spared some kind of suffering?
Oh, they're definitely probably. It's just like look, I don't think that in God's eyes anybody is entirely evil. Like I think like God is always forgiving. God is always like trying to look at like the best aspects of everybody
But
else's
like
life.
you say that though, and I wonder where that's grounded in theology because it's not explicitly in a theological concept. So like what I'm doing right now is just sort of like because from my perspective, so like you're saying a bunch of things, but I don't know
I
how
know
to
they.
interface with them because I'm like, well, where are the ideas coming from? Like what is their origin or justification?
Yeah.
Um,
What you I don't know if I completely understand what you mean by justification. Like, I mean,
well,
like,
like this, like certain things, like are they theologically so? Like if you have your justification in the Bible, that's reasonable. But then when it comes to sort of things which are larger than the Bible, um, it's so like I don't know what you just said that I commented on a moment
oh,
ago.
like that God, for example, is always forgiving,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
example.
like
Yeah.
yeah. There's nobody that God doesn't see some good in. Like, is that in the Bible?
I don't know if it's like explicit, like, because the Bible is it's so beautiful and interesting is because it talks with symbols, right? It's not gonna say most things like explicitly. You kind of have to
Well,
like interpret it.
but like
But
there is this one verse, but a very interesting verse about the unforgivable sin, blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. I've interpreted this as potentially neuroscientifically, if you have neurology that's dedicated to beliefs and behaviors, if you do so many wrong things that your entire brain becomes filled with evil, maybe there's at some point uh, and then there's almost like no return because you become entirely evil. Then if you're even like faced with the idea of doing good, it's from evil because you're entirely evil. So like I wonder if there is a point where somebody crosses a line where there's like no return, where they kind of like lose their consciousness because they've become so dark. And so that's where like, I'm pushing
I
back
think,
on that because yeah.
yeah, no, that's an interesting thing that you put forward. Like, I would say that the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit is probably more. Okay, there's a way in which like um humility is necessary for the cultivation of wisdom, right? It's like it's central to it, right? Like, and rationality, to the cultivation of rationality as well. So like, eh, there is also a reason why, like, we could say like, I know that I'm jumping a lot, but like I'm gonna tie it back again. Just excuse me. It's a way also like in which like in Genesis, the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil is said to have been a consequence of pride, right? So I think that the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit is not so much, say, people doing a whole bunch of bad things. Yeah, yes, of course it's that, but like that is a consequence of willingly deciding to live a life unbothered with what God has to say about it. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people say atheist. A lot of atheists, they don't necessarily entirely not believe, because I think like not believing would be something complete anarchy. You know what I mean? It's like nothing matters, only my desire matters, and I don't care about anybody, anything else. I think that is the consequence of the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. If you are an atheist, but that you still believe in things that are connected to, say, the good, which is a transcendental, or the true, or the beautiful, then to the extent that you still are committed to those things, you are not entirely an atheist, because your actions are showing what you believe in. You know what I mean? Now, it puts people very far from God if they because there will be instances in which they will not have the right wisdom to navigate the traps that the enemy puts in front of them. Um, eh, but um, but that doesn't mean that a lot of that the majority of people are burning in hell. I think I think there's the majority of people, both believers and non-believers, are in between, and there's only very few people that are actually get to heaven without some other type of purification process. And there's also a very small percentage of people that have no hope, you know.
Yeah, okay. Now one thing I'm wondering is like, what is your logos? Because we could think about even theology as a technology in some sense. It certainly can be used for wrong because that's happened in the past many times. What is the what is you described this concept that technology needs to be with the purpose of being linked back to divine goodness, God. So what is that for you? Like specifically when you talk about these things, why are you sharing this? Because it's not like people don't have access to theology. Do you think that like I don't understand theology? That's not meant to sound confrontational. I'm just trying to like parse apart why I'm bringing this up. Like, do you think these are that I do understand it and this is a conduit to talk about with other people? Do you think other people lack these theological understandings? Or are you just like resonating in the truth of it, sort of like there's this concept that like when people hear a good performance they kind of want to just do something, they want to clap, they want to participate in it. Is your purpose for talking about this stuff just this pure resonance in its beauty in some sense?
I think the reason why I mention it is because I think that we all need to hear it, because I think we're all um very concentrated with um our immediate and don't get me wrong, this is important to be concentrated in our immediate like well-being, you know, like individual well-being, and our like own projects and our own like individuality and our own like, you know, like embrace of our own responsibility and things like that, you know, like that. I think that's very important. But when we there is a sense in which we can get very easily caught up in those things, and we stop thinking about um that we don't exist. We stop, or we forget that we don't exist in isolation from everybody else. And so I think that I think that when we if we were to try to be, you know, like is there's also in the Bible it says, knock and it shall be open, you know, ask and you shall receive. Well, like it depends. You can get open doors and get answers depending on where you orient your questions. So like if you have those questions, you will get the answers if you seek for them. So like I I think that anybody can read it for themselves, like if they have the same questions and they try to like commit to having faith for the Bible being the word of God, and you know, like participating in all of this ecology of wisdom cultivating practices, uh you can eventually get to the same place, because like is in the same way that people like do Bible studies and they share different insights on what they find. Well, a lot of the time is not that this is wrong, but the problem is like a lot of people don't see what I'm trying to point out is because a lot of the time the questions that they are concerned with is how do I improve my own life, how do I you know, how am I becoming a better father, how do like, and that's great, like don't get me wrong, that's what it's meant for, you know. But if you're also concerned, for example, like say, well, how do we get out of the postmodern predicament, or like what's the deal with technology? How can I cultivate wisdom so that I understand how to properly use it? Like when can I identify when like technology is being more detrimental to me than beneficial, and to what extent do I should I keep like my distance from it, and all of these things. Like then is it's also not that the answer is gonna show up like immediately, you know what I mean? It's like constant coming back to it. God slowly starts showing you bits and pieces, and you start forming the whole puzzle. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah. But now, like, so you're sort of describing these theological concepts. One thing that I have thought about, and I don't um understand the utility of it, is that there there seems to be mm, like practices that are performed without a specific aim. So like um people will sort of talk about the you know like talk about theology, right? In certain ways, and then I'm like, well, like, why are you doing that? So, or like, this is the big example of this is like, you kind of described. I don't know if this is correct description, but something like that that there's this requirement to that people are maybe too focused on their own life, and then there's this need to sort of bring that awareness out to uh higher, more divine things. But when I hear that, it feels like that is a form of manifesting the opposite. So an, uh, a concrete example of this is like, if you are constantly telling somebody how not to be sick, what they're going to intuit is, I'm sick. And so, like, doing something to get somebody out of a problem which is not clearly defined, to me, generates the problem.
I see what you mean. Um, yeah, there can be a sense in which that happens. Definitely. Like I think there's like uh, um, what would you call that? I guess another psychological phenomena that is the opposite of the placebo. That is
Oh,
the
like the
nocebo
nocebo,
effect.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, that I think that that can definitely happen. But and I guess your question is more like, how do I know that I am not diag- diagnosing something that is not really there, and then creating a problem around it? Is that what you're sort of asking?
Yeah.
Because the reason why I am committed to this belief is because the consequence, because the reason we have a meaning crisis was grounded on that separation from God. So like before us right now, in the past 20, it's just it's not even been much, like probably 2024, since like there's been like this revival of like way more people talking about theology and philosophy in the public sphere, whereas before it would be way more secular, way more like it got to the point where people were already sure that the new atheist movement had already had all the cards, and that they had already basically won like that type of debate, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
that's actually, I just gotta interrupt. That's so cool you say that. I pointed out to people so much that that was the history of where we're at is the new atheism. Did you watch like the
eh,
debates between Dawkins and Hitchens and
I've watched the debates between Dawkins and like Peterson, and I watched like a lot of. I actually, when I got to know the new atheist movement is like through this circle, because I think like I think everybody was an atheist, whether they were like involved in wanting to like learn what the arguments for or not. Like I think like I was an atheist and I didn't even care, man. Like I was just doing whatever the heck I wanted. You know, I was just like a hedonist basically, and I didn't care whatever you want to think. You know, like at that time, like I was like, whatever you want to think, that goes, man. I don't care. Like you know, I just leave me alone. I leave you alone, and like you know, I wasn't concerned with that. But like I think that that also, you know, it not only brought my own life um to like a conclusion where it was no longer, it had no longer any life when I ran it completely, because I almost like, long story short, I don't want to get too personal in here, but long story short, like my own hedonism almost cost me my own family, and that was not even that long ago, you know. And I had to like completely die it to myself, um, to start making my life better. You know, I didn't even know that I was sick until everything almost collapsed in front of my eyes, and I had to start uh, organizing my whole life from almost zero. You know, um, and you know, it's not that I don't think that I am diagnosing something. I because I when I was sick, I didn't notice. It was only after I realized I was sick
yeah,
that
well,
I opened the door to get better.
here here's what I'm
But I also don't think that this is just me. I think that this is a symptom that we can see in culture in general. Like I think like the new atheist movement, it was so strong, and that is exactly what led us to the meaning crisis that we're living right now. And the only way out of the meaning crisis is through um well, to start having more of these conversations, because and like I think ultimately the way out to the meaning crisis is to accept Christ, because obviously I'm committed to that truth. uh but even if you're just trying to cultivate wisdom, that is a huge start. That is a huge start, you know. That's like what Vervaeke argues is like, okay, let's just start having all of these different ecology of practices, and let's just not think that these psychotechnologies such as religion were just completely useless. Let's just start bringing them back and start trying to understand why they were important. Even if you want to do it from a secular point of view, even then start doing it. You know what I mean? Because Vervaeke is committed also to secularism. He doesn't want to like explicitly or random like explicitly accept any one god of any of the major religions. He wants to try to unite them all. And I think that's where he also opens the door for a little bit of dangerous implications that we are not sure how they're going to like unfold, you know. But every great thinker has this amphibian type of um, proclivity, you know. They are too smart for their own good, and so like they want to get way too much accomplished that they can actually grasp, and that is a problem. And you know, we all suffer from this thing. That's the story of the fall. That's never going to stop until we are able to complete history, you know. And so like it's just I also don't think that we should condemn him or like Vervaeke or anybody else that is you know just trying to figure out the same way. That's why I was saying, like, you asked me, this goes back to what you were asking, like what do I think between Orthodox and like high church and low church. And I think that they are Christians. I think that they're all like part of the body of Christ. I just think that um, they all have different levels of understanding of the truth. Um, I think none of them have the absolute truth. But I do think that more tolerance from both sides, both like tolerance from the Protestants for all of the to try to be humble and recognize the importance of all of the tradition and why tradition and authority and the hierarchy and all of these things and beauty are important to maintain. But on the other side, I also think that the Orthodox should also not be so fast to condemn them brothers or to expect them to be able to consume meat before being trained with milk. You know, like you cannot expect somebody to appreciate high art if they have not been consuming high art for a long time. You know what I mean? Like if they have been like everything has been like dissolved to a point where it's like easily consumed, you cannot expect them to just like beat them with the stick so that they can like appreciate like the structure of a mass, for example, if they have been like say, I don't know, singing country songs in order to worship. Not saying that this is bad. That's another beautiful way of doing it. Like, but I also think that both are important
Isn't
pieces of the
now
puzzle.
I don't know much about this at all, but as a musician, I'm thinking the structure of a mass. So are they playing songs that are traditional from a while back?
They're playing songs a little bit more, yeah. At least from in Catholic, I think like Orthodox even goes even they're even more strict with their choice of music. It's
But I
more
don't necessarily understand that though, because it feels arbitrary. As a musician, I know that the Baroque,
a little bit.
classical, Romantic period, they they had tremendous beauty in each period. And I'll go as far as to say it's possible that each period produced music that was perfect in some way, where it's not progressing, it's just like something in its fullness where it is. But to then sort of like take one period, because I'm guessing this is maybe pre-Baroque, where they're taking their Gregorian chant, maybe more, maybe just Baroque, going into Baroque period, where they're taking their musical culture from. It seems strange to me to just go down and just pick one time period where the music was produced.
I think that's also very fair and true, actually. Like I think that and actually like like even it's exactly how you say it's very arbitrary really like the choice of music. But that's just it's just one example out of many in terms of like how that they are exposing themselves to beauty. Like the best example perhaps would be the Eucharist, for example. The Eucharist actually would be the best example because it's the most transcendental, you know.
What is the Eucharist?
Uh,
It's like chalice or something.
so the Eucharist is the body of Christ, like that the host that gets like breaking and like delivered to everybody. And there's a lot of denominations that have dispensed with that because they don't think that you don't need you don't need to have you don't need to partake in the Eucharist to gain heaven, which I don't think they're absolutely wrong, but I also think that they are not quite getting the importance of it. It's like one of the most beautiful things that you can
This
uh,
so
participate on.
this is an exponent of Jesus when he said, "Do this in remembrance to me. Eat my." Okay, right.
in
Okay,
the
but this is what
in the Last Supper. Yeah,
Protestants do that though.
not all of them, because
Oh,
Protestantism has so many denominations. It has so many multiplicity of them.
right.
For example, Anglicanism, I think they still do it. Uh, eh, Lutheranism, like there's a lot, but not all of them. Not all of them do it. And for example, like not all of them like there's a big emphasis, especially in like high churches on the sacraments. And I think the sacraments are something that yes, it's true. It's probably true. Like this is what I was saying about like there's seeds of truth in almost like every big lie, because it is probably true that you don't need, it's not that you need the sacraments to gain salvation,
What
almost
are
as if
the
it's like a contract with God. But
what are
like
the
a lot of people get
sacraments?
the sacraments is there's sacraments. Let me 7 sacraments. Baptism, first communion, confirmation, marriage, anointed of the sick, high orders, it like um, divine orders, and there's another one that I'm missing. Um, oh, the Eucharist, of course. The Eucharist is one of the.
No, this is
Uh,
I've known that like Orthodoxy and I know I've seen the Catholic traditions, but it doesn't seem like there's that much. No, is there as much traditions in Orthodoxy as there is in Catholicism? Because I know Catholicism, it's like, daily prayers and like sort of very structured services where they kneel down at a certain time
yeah,
and they get up and they do all this stuff.
I would say probably Eastern Orthodox. They're even a little bit more strict even than Catholicism because they're very committed to the faith, and which
Do
is
they
beautiful actually.
have like rosary type prayer type equivalents?
They have a praying. I think it's called a praying rope, but they can also pray the rosary. They have no problem with that because they also think of the Theotokos, the Mother of Christ, as their our mother. You know, um, it's very little. There's more emphasis on very on beauty and on living like on 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 highlighting like the importance of like a cosmos in like the Orthodox Eastern Orthodox tradition. Like for example, like they try to build their churches in a very specific way with certain dimensions. Like they try to always have very very beautiful art. Like like they put a lot of emphasis on like the different artifacts that they have around the the church and all of this. Like Catholicism, they do as well still, but let's just say that because it's also so big and not everybody in the church is that committed to it. They're doing more like there's sometimes like the instances where like a big percentage of the people at the church is just doing it because it's like a part of a routine, or maybe like it's like a family thing that not like what would you say, like a tradition, you know more than actually being actively engaged with, like they still believe and everything, but they're not actually actively engaged in like what they can do for, like in their own journey to Christ. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, I believe that God will save me, and that my faith saves me, and they just show to mass. But I think like in Eastern Orthodox, they're more confronted with that. They're more confronted with like in their masses. Like Catholicism also does this, but like I said, a lot of people in Catholicism, because it's so big, they go to mass to receive the Eucharist, and they don't listen. They You can see this more often, like say people not listening to the sermons, or like like just talking with each other and stuff like that. They don't have this sense of reverence so that much, and that is a slight problem. I think that's another reason why Eastern Orthodoxy sometimes like they still like regard Catholicism as very, like a very important part of the faith and everything, but there can be like these differences because I think Eastern Orthodoxy, it, the way that it's remained alive is by everybody that lands there is because they're hardcore Christians. You know what I mean? Like they are very committed to everything that the beauty of like the Christian story or the Christian narrative has to tell them, and they are there to serve. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of
Now,
weird.
when it comes to the sacraments, are they, what do you think? Are they a possible interpretation of what you can do in Christianity, or are they better? So is it okay that there's, you know, some people that don't do sacraments, they have a different relationship, or should everybody really be doing the sacraments? The reason why I say this is because, like, well, if there's no necessity to do them necessarily, then it would be better not to do them because then you can spend more time being productive in the world.
Um, I would say is not that it removes it's not like it takes away your salvation. I think it's more that it's a gift designed to help you. And if you don't use it, well, that's up to you, but also you're missing out in a lot because like it goes back to what we were saying about like the importance of rituals. So like all of these rituals are important because they're deep symbolic significance. And so like just dispensing with that because saying like being sprinkled with water and saying that I am being reborn, that's not gonna save me. Like if God loves me, He's not going to like deny me heaven if I don't get like a sprinkle with water. Yeah, probably that's true, but also at the same time, you're not looking at the whole ritual and at the whole sacrament properly. Like you should like stop and actually contemplate. It's like an opportunity to contemplate and partake into a deep mystery, a very deep mystery. Like when we get baptized, we do it because Christ Himself was baptized. And so when you like it's a mystery because it has so much inside of it. It's like you can never extract more like enough wisdom from it. Like it's you are being anointed as a little Christian when you are being baptized. And so you have a responsibility. You like it's not just something trivial that you do just for tradition to make your grandma happy. You know what I mean? It's something way more deeper than that. It's like you are starting a ministry as well, being part of the body of Christ. Whether you're going to be maybe like in divine orders, like a priest, or you're going to be a husband in a marriage or a wife in a marriage eventually, those are like the sacraments of service, and you are supposed to live a life in such a way that you are resembling Christ, like like so it's very deep. All of these like sacraments, they have so much mystery in them, and so like just dispensing with them because that's just not gonna get me salvation, so I won't do it because I don't need it is the wrong attitude towards them. It's like it's a gift. It's like if you have the opportunity to have it, would you deny yourself it? You know?
Yeah. Now, this may sound like a ignorant question, but somebody told me that um that that some branches of Eastern Orthodoxy don't suppose that Jesus is their Lord and Savior, that the tradition is more paramount than the figure of Jesus. Is that true, or is that
I don't think so. I don't know. I'm actually not entirely sure, but that's sounds very bizarre to me.
okay?
I don't think that it would be like that. I think because um it goes back to like um this idea of like it's Christ co-substantial with the Father. Is like Christ God as well, and that was like Arianism was one of like the um um I guess like heresies that was fought like towards the beginning of Christianity, that was sick to say like basically Jesus was not God, and that that he was a still very important prophet, but he was still not God, and that he was just like fulfilling the will of God. But like if Jesus is not God, um the depth of the beauty of the Bible loses a lot of depth. Like there's a lot that you cannot explain if you just remove that.
Mhm.
And so like it's important to understand like Jesus, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit as one God, but with different um different persons. So they're different. They're one God, and they one proceeds from the other. And this is like this whole theology of the Trinity is so profound and beautiful as well, because there's so much in there that in that mystery as well. It's like this idea of unity in multiplicity. It goes back to what we were talking about the logos, and also this idea of hierarchy and obedience and how it flows even within God itself himself, how there's this progression of things, and Jesus dying in the cross is the biggest example of faith and obedience that God himself could give to us, because him being God himself, he emptied himself of all of his power to die on the cross without having any power,
Mhm.
just fully being obedient to the Father. So it's it's so profound. It's so profound that like I don't think that it would work like a Christianity without Christ being God. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
eh,
that makes sense.
yeah, like no, now again, like I don't know. There's so much multiplicity of different branches that I wouldn't be able to say for certain, but I just don't think that it would yeah,
Yeah.
it would work. Yeah.
Now this is a question because so there there appears to be something about Christianity which is tremendously coherent. And I don't understand why forever having traditions would be coherent because um when I think about, as a base example, a computer, if I have a computer and I want this computer to be as functional as possible, ultimately it would be good if it doesn't have routines which are stagnant to the environment and don't sort of feedback on the environment. It seems like it just seems like sort of doing traditions all the time. Now, in in my understanding, in Protestant Christianity, there the things which you mentioned, baptism and sort of it's called communion,
You
but the
yeah, community. Yeah.
right, they're still practiced. I would say I would think in most Protestant churches, but there isn't a continuous sort of day-to-day routine that must be followed. And so like it seems like if God created the world, why would he make humans sort of incapable of just existing on their own, and that there would have to be a constant doing of rituals? Because a ritual takes up a lot of time because you can't be doing anything else while you're doing a ritual. So it seems like ultimately it must be suboptimal, because wouldn't it be more optimal if the person could have the same communion with God, the same relationship with God, without having to do the rituals? It seems a
I
bit.
would say like I would say like God. There's very few rituals that actually got established. I would say like the Eucharist or the Holy Communion. It's perhaps one of them, because it's like it states explicitly like Jesus explaining, like that it was like a ritual that was to be continued to be performed so that we may remember him. But aside from that, all the other rituals are actually we make them. You know, we have made them. That's not to say that they are not beneficial. Like I mean, um,
So they are
I,
plastic. They're not like they are like the Quran
yes.
is for the Islam.
So like I would say the Bible is not plastic, but I would say the rituals can definitely evolve. The rituals definitely are evolving. I think our science, our cognitive science, have also uh, shown that, that rituals do have evolved over time. But it's I also don't think that God is intending us to be like doing rituals all the time, but I do think that um having having what would you say is not the word is not limitations, it's more like constraints. Having constraints to your life, like put setting up constraints in your life, actually allow you to have more freedom. You know.
Yeah, well, this is
Uh,
something that Caden said that I thought was phenomenally interesting. He said that in his experience, the high church people are much more comfortable talking about theology. They're much more comfortable challenging the axioms of their belief on a deep level versus the low church does not want to talk about theology that much, which is
bec-
my experience, I would say as well now after talking to, you know, more people.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think also it's because um they see religion, they actually see religion as a they see they partake in their religion as an in the way that Nietzsche criticized it, I would say, which is not
Which
fair to say, it's not nice to say, but like which is like oppressor and oppressed, you know.
which
They
does the high
see
church or low church?
the low church because they see if they don't, that's why they jump easy, they jump faster to condemn everybody that is outside of their denomination. That's why they're not willing to challenge their own ideas or talk about these things, because in their mind, questioning their own belief like that, or talking with somebody else openly about like beliefs like this, it's like direct attack on God Himself, and they see that as well as completely sacrilegious, or like as something extremely dangerous. You know what I mean? Now, I think high church people also, they wouldn't. They're not. The high church people. They're not. It's not like they will. But it's the reason why they can challenge maybe, or like play around with different motifs more, is because they have a very much more deeper understanding of their faith, because they are partaking in all of these rituals constantly, and they are getting a lot of wisdom from them. So like they're properly understanding what they're saying, what the Bible is saying. They're not just say, for example, showing up somewhere and asking somebody else to tell them what the Bible is saying to them. They're actually treating the book as something sacred in which they can have a direct connection with God. And so like they are practicing all of this. They're partaking in all of these
But
ecological practices.
Protestants, like what you just defined right there, Protestants also would say, like they view the Bible as something that they are having a direct connection with God through.
They do, but like in a different way. I think
Wait,
in a different way.
but hold on. So like, so first of all, you feel a lack of maturity from the low church in that they
It's
judge.
not. mm, yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. Like it's tricky because I don't want to. I think the judgment, it's in all sides. First of all, because to the extent that
Well,
we cannot reconcile.
shouldn't it be? Because like if one side's better, then the one side should be going like, well, what we're doing is
Yes,
better.
definitely. Like what would you say? Like um, when you make a group, or when you make a group, you necessarily exclude other things that don't lie within the group. You know what I mean? So like That's the complication with it. But I think that so like I wouldn't be so fast to say like is the low church that are like the judgmental ones or the high church. I think like there's judgment in all of them, and I think like it's they should all understand each other as like part of the body of Christ, which would perhaps open the door for like the possibility of having those discussions more. You know what I mean? And why? But the what Caden says is true, that like low churches are unwilling. They don't have the humility and the maturity to sit down and uh, talk through why is it that it's important.
But wouldn't wouldn't the high church also have its immovable points? So like the sacraments, the high churches wouldn't move on those. So it's like the
Definitely.
the low church doesn't want to move on its theology, but will move on its practices, and then the high church will move on its theology, but not the practices. So they're both kind of doing something different, right?
The thing is like the the low church already like the the complication is that the low church has dispensed with a lot of the practices that are very beneficial, and they're unwilling to consider why is it that it's beneficial to maintain those, to reconsider why it's beneficial to maintain those, like they're
Like what would an example of that be?
like for example, like say in the denomination, for example, I have uh, this happens in my own home sometimes, like I'm getting a little bit personal here, but like it's something that I've been having to try to navigate with my own partner. For example, we are two different denominations. Like I go to Catholic, she goes to Salvation Army. She's like another branch of Protestantism, but like they don't celebrate like the baptism or the Eucharist or all of these
Oh, I
things.
see.
You know what I mean? So like I'm not it's not like I want to I'm going to go and say like, oh, I'm condemning all of the people in the Salvation Army. They're wonderful people. Like I've been to their services many times, and I can feel the Holy Spirit in them with there, and there's like great people over there, that they mean uh, uh like to do the best thing that they can do. Uh, but when confronted, for example, with the idea of baptism, for some reason there's something that makes them allergic to it.
Well,
Uh,
it must be like this must be what it is. It's because you're enacting out something which in theory is a mental thing. So, I mean, this is you would agree this is what happened when Jesus um arrived, is that many things that were enacted out then became mental. So, two examples, sacrifice was um something which was performed where they would sacrifice animals, and then Jesus took the place of that, and that was no longer performed. And then there was more examples. So, for example, circumcision was, I remember, I think Paul was saying something about circumcision of the heart, describing it as like a symbol. One thing that was a practice becomes like a symbol. Um,
yeah.
but so there's that motif, where where like I could, um, it, it seems like somebody would like could reasonably see the practice and go like, well, what's the purpose of actually doing it? Shouldn't it be a heart thing?
Yeah, and I think it's not that they're like they're not wrong in their protestation, because to the extent that there's people that will condemn them for not having it, that's a right protestation of being like, well, you know what? I'm gonna show you that I don't need it, and that God still loves me because I still worship Him and I still try to do the best thing that I can without having to partake in this ritual, for example, right? And to that extent, it's like, I mean, all power to you, man. Like, like eh, to a certain degree, that's true. But also, they are dispensing with a beautiful gift that is ready for them to partake in, that they don't understand what they're missing. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of both. So like when you want to, I think what Kaden is referring to is like, say, if I were to want to like discuss baptism with them, they're so that centered into wanting to understand God, like um, um, it's both sides, because like one side wants to show that God does not require us to do these procedural rituals, to be able to be in communion with Him. But then but then they're unwilling to consider what the benefits are and why it's important to not try to dispense with it lightly. And then the other side is also like they are unwilling to accept the fact that God doesn't need anything from us because He's God. He's perfect. It's like an incorrect understanding of the Bible. Also, it's like an incorrect reading. It doesn't have the fullness of the truth, because like it's not gonna change anything for God whether we get baptized or not. Like, if God wants us to do it, is because it's good for us. It's not because it's going to change Him, is going to make Him less God or more God if we get baptized or not. It doesn't affect Him in the least. But like, to the extent that we don't do it, it's same with sin. Like, if you sin, it doesn't hurt God at all. You know, it upsets Him, like any father will get upset if their son is like going through a bad, is going through the bad path. It will upset Him, but not because it changes anything for Him. Is because He doesn't want us to see us suffering, because He's a loving Father. You know what I mean? And so, like, it's the same thing. Like, it's not like God. The most important thing is like, and why like High Church regards the sacraments as something so important, is because like it's one of the ways in which we can uh, get access to the revelation of those deep mysteries that we enact that are within the Bible. Like, you can encounter those mysteries by reading the Bible, but there's only so much that you're going to like be able to extract from there. On the other side, like, if you once a year experience like, I don't know, 15 baptisms, from the new children that are joining the church, and you partake in them and you see on it, and then you continually reading the Bible, and then you're seeing it being enacted, and then you're like looking at the mass and everything. It opens, because it's a disruptive strategy, it opens and prepares you for revelation into what the deep mystery is trying to tell you. You know what I mean? That's why this huge emphasis on the Eucharist, because it's like that is actually the one ritual that God established, and it's the one ritual that we can say that we are consuming the body of Christ. We are what we consume. Like, we're becoming a, and we're being integrated into His body as we
Now,
as we consume Him.
isn't Jordan Peterson's model low church? Vervaeke's
I
model is high
think
church.
he's been going to I don't know. I think he's reluctant to say, because he doesn't want to get into all the weeds of this
Oh,
conversation that we're having.
I
But
mean the implications of his model. Like, if you understand Peterson's model, wouldn't it more align with the low church? Because the low church supposes that you more just have,
that God
there's
is
no,
like accessible to everybody, and that you don't need all of these fancy things basically to get to Him. Is
well, yeah,
that is that
there's nothing in Jordan Peterson's model which describes ritual as being something which is sort of necessary. He's because I remember he's appreciative of rituals, so he'll perform them for other people, but I don't think it's in his model.
I don't know. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's in his model or not, or if he have given a lot of thought to it. Um, but I think that there is something to be said for rituals, um, and their importance.
Okay, well,
Um,
I mean, this is what I'm seeing right now is like, this is what I'm wondering is like, so Jordan Peterson's model, you could say is, um, it is grounded in various forms of philosophy, and psychology. Vervaeke's model, I don't understand what precisely it's grounded in. So, like, the idea that there's sort of this, um, it's true that like there is this process of embodying something, and that there's these different levels of knowing something, procedural, perspectival, propositional, but it doesn't. I, th- this is, I mean, I think I pose this to Caden as well. There doesn't seem to be a philosophical or psychological necessity, or even a hinting that ritual is something that people should be doing. There is evidence on all regards of ritual to an extent. So, like, developmentally, children first enact out before they understand. But I like,
the
mhm.
I think I have to review it again, but I think there is one lecture in Intelligence, Rationality, Wisdom, and Spirituality, which he makes a case for ritual. Vervaeke. There's a couple books on it. But part of ritual, why ritual is important is because what I was saying about it being a disruptive strategy. So like most rituals are weird to where they put you in a place where you don't fully understand them entirely what's going on. But that's also that is intended, because back in the day, actually mass used to have a lot of incense, like
Right.
a lot of incense. Like they actually try to cause or induce a type of altered state of consciousness within it. Um, and so like there, uh, and like a lot of the research that has been done on it, from a cognitive science and psychological perspective, I think it has been on Zoroastrianism, rituals in Zoroastrianism and things like that. Um had it written somewhere, a couple of uh, good resources for that. But anyways, um, there is something to be said for ritual, but no, I think Jordan Peterson is it's getting a different thing, at a different thing. I think they're both kind of they both kind of address the same problem from different, but they tackle it differently. I think Vervaeke is more, it's a more systematic thinker. It's like more, but his arguments are super dense and layered. Like he borrows from, he's able to like, draw that tiny thread of like meaning between like vast amounts of different works. Like he's an avid reader. He must be. But Peterson is more on the side of, he's more interested on clinical psychology. So he's interested in what works for helping a patient, so to speak. Vervaeke is more interested in um, diagnosing what is the problem of our time, and then trying to come up with a philosophical framework to solve it. Like it's more like trying to say like, okay, what is the historical evidence for the meaning crisis? And then so he lays out like literally the whole history of it, like from shamanism and like uh, not even shamanism, from like um the first humans, the invention of first tools, all the way to like postmodernism, and he maps the whole thing out. He's like is
Wait,
insane.
who does?
Vervaeke.
Hmm.
um Peterson is more like he's actually a pragmatist. He's more interested in like what works clinically. So like he's like thinking about all the similar things, but he's not concerned on saying like say for example, giving a philosophical account like explicitly on say like what we understand reality to be like. He's more like, okay, what's going on in the mind of an individual, and how does he orient himself in the world, and then what's going to help him act in the world so that he can flourish and get better. And so I was reviewing the first episode of Personality and its Transformations, and it's wonderful because I think that it actually lays out his work, his life's work is like around that. It's like, okay, um how can we improve, or how can we conceptualize what a personality is, and then how can we set people up on the right path to um, overcome bad aspects of their personality, and strengthen the good ones. And so like he obviously does still like the philosophical and psychological foundations for it. But he's interested in, okay, how can I help my patients with this? Whereas Rebecca is more like this. Let's map out this whole model of what's happening in society right now, and with everything, like literally almost everything, and then diagnose it, and then come up with a solution from it, which is like an astronomical task. I don't even know. I don't even think that he has finished his work. Like everything that he talks about is a work in progress, because he's mapping out everything. He's mapping out, okay, what is beauty. Eventually I think he's going to talk about like what the good is, what truth is. He's like mapping, okay, what is intelligence, what is rationality, what is to have a spirituality, what is wisdom. And he's like building all of these like this um lexicon or semantical cloud of definitions, or like vocabulary basically. And then with all of that vocabulary, because it's an astronomical task, then his project is to try to solve it. But it's not clear to me that he's not going to land again in Christianity, actually. Because I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the people that he engages in a lot of deep conversations, like the majority of them are Catholics or Christians. Like, he still engages in some people with Buddhism, and I think he started actually with Buddhism mostly, and Zen, and he still considers himself a Zen Neoplatonist. But I think there's going to be this whole project is going to lead him towards like not being able to dispense with it. And he already acknowledges it, but I think that he's going to find that probably like the way out is by committing to Christ. Or at least that's my prediction. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how things unfold.
Super, super interesting because I wonder about Vervaeke. It's the same thing like with you. Like I hope it wasn't too challenging. I see we've done 2 hours already, so probably come to a close shortly. But um it's like I get I wonder about like what he's doing because like it's difficult for me to bite into it. Like so like and this is, again, I hope I wasn't too confrontational or challenging, but like when I'm
No, no, no,
trying to
man.
understand like a model or like a way things are going, I want to like attack it. Like what is because kind of like I guess the postmodernists do is I want to deconstruct it as much as I can, philosophize with the hammer, of course, like
Mhm.
Nietzsche,
No,
to try.
I think that's wonderful, man. I think that's wonderful. It doesn't bother me at all. Like I think that um, even the more present you can be to somebody's ideas, the better, because like even that even helps like anybody. Like it even helps think through um my own thoughts even harder. You know what I mean? And so that's amazing, man. Like I really enjoyed the conversation for sure. Uh,
Fantastic. Likewise, it's I it's helping me deeply understand these things, which like Vervaeke's model, which I still, you know, am almost looking for like an entry point or like a more, it's yeah, it's very helpful.
yeah, I think he has a massive project, but I don't think um yeah, I don't think I think he has a long way to go because it's so much. Like I think he is probably the closest that he can probably get to a theory of everything from a philosophical or
Right.
psychological point of view. So he has to uh, summarize the whole philosophical history of everything, and like which ones are the positions that of almost all philosophers, like what we were talking about the logos, which thread of all of those philosophers is good to maintain, and what other things like you have to discard, like, or reject, to be able to come up with this theory. And then after that, or like what are the implications of all of these philosophies, and actually by mapping the implications you can discard the bad aspects of it, and then only remain with the good stuff that you want to maintain or what is necessary. And then after that, then you maybe can come up with a solution to the meaning crisis. But like until then, I don't think I think it's still like a long way to go. And I think like there's people like already doing a lot of work towards it, like TC Schindler and people like that, like um eh, and they are addressing the meaning crisis from like a neoplatonic a Christian perspective, or Catholic perspective. But yeah, we'll see how everything unfolds for sure. I would love to see DC Chandler do a course in Peterson Academy, man. I think that will be very, very interesting. Uh,
I'm
but
not too
yeah,
familiar with who that is.
yeah, he's another philosopher, like eh, that we have the privilege to live in the same time as. But yeah, man, I mean, hopefully uh, you should try to give it a try. Like Love and the Postmodern Predicament is one of his most um I guess
Hmm.
powerful works. It's very interesting. You should
Very,
give it
very
a try.
interesting. Yeah, cool. I will. All right. Thank you very much.
All
I
right.
very much enjoyed this.
Thank you too, man. And like I'd love to continue to have more conversation. I'm sure like there is an inexhaustible amount of things to talk about for sure.
Likewise, I mean that's how kind of how I feel is it feels like I that there's a lot of things that I want to keep going down to understand better and, you know, start to bridge gaps and come to understandings. So yeah, I feel the same way.
Absolutely. Let's do it, bro. Let's yeah. I would be down to do whenever you want this again. Like, and yeah, man. I had lots of
Brilliant.
fun. Thank you so much for having
Fantastic. All right.
her, bro. Catch you later, man.
Later.